Okay. All right. Well, once again, welcome to everybody who's here. Welcome to WooStream's professional development webinar series with our latest session, Salary Negotiation Tips. My name's Anne Lapour. I serve as the Executive Director of Career Initiatives here at Willamette. And before we get started and I introduce our other speakers involved this evening, I'll share a little bit about myself for those who don't know me or haven't seen me at one of these other sessions. I started working at Willamette in 2017, where I've worked as a career development advisor, instructor, and administrator. I earned my bachelor's and PhD from the University of Missouri in Columbia, focused on career and vocational psychology. I'm interested in personal identity and values that influence the development of career goals and aspirations. I'm a believer in nonlinear and the always fascinating directions a career can take. I love working for Willamette and believe that interdisciplinary opportunities there can fuel very rewarding careers. Tonight's session will focus on insights and helpful tips in negotiating your salary along the different stages of your career journey. I'm excited to introduce my fellow speakers this evening, Jasmine Ames and Heather Flynn. Jasmine Ames is a senior relationship manager at U.S. Bank Impact Finance, where she works with nonprofit and mission-driven organizations on capital strategy, treasury solutions, and long-term financial sustainability. She holds a PhD in law and public policy and an MBA, and she also serves on several nonprofit boards focused on housing, community development, and equity. In addition to her industry work, Jasmine teaches strategic management at the graduate level. She's passionate about helping students translate their MBA skill sets into meaningful, flexible, and values-aligned careers. So welcome, Jasmine. Our other speaker this evening is Heather Flynn. Heather Flynn is a global talent acquisition executive with 25 plus years of experience leading enterprise recruiting strategies across retail, technology, and biotech. Proven track record building and scaling high-performing global teams across North America, Europe, Asia, and emerging markets. She's a trusted advisor to C-suite leaders, recognized for driving transformative talent strategies that accelerate growth, strengthen employer brand, and deliver measurable outcomes. Heather has deep expertise across workforce planning, centers of excellence, and recruiting models from high volume through executive search. She's a builder and change agent with experience at iconic brands, including Nike, Aritzia, Illumina, and ASML. Known for delivering scalable, inclusive, and data-driven recruiting solutions aligned to evolving business priorities. So Jasmine and Heather, again, thank you for joining me this evening. And I think without further ado, we are going to go ahead and get started discussing salary negotiations. So Jasmine, I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anne. And some of you have taken the time to pre-submit some questions for us this evening. So we really want to have, this interactive session that's very informative. So I'm going to start with the first question. Can you tell us a little bit more about what timing you should factor in when you're looking to negotiate salary at your current company? And maybe just give us some ideas around factors to consider or keywords to be aware of or any tips or tricks you have around timing.
Yeah.
I'll let you go first, Heather.
Okay. So I'll start with that. So most organizations have an annual performance review, which is when your performance is going to be reviewed and you're going to get rated, and then merit increases are going to happen then. So you have to time it with that. I will say most organizations also have a budget. It's 2 or 3%. So it's not going to be huge numbers you're talking about here. If you are up for promotion, then that's a different story. But I think you want to come armed with data always. We're talking about salaries now and negotiations, but data always for everything. And why you are asking for a certain amount of, a range or an increase and what value it is that you deliver to the organization. I will say broadly, a lot of companies now are required to publicly disclose their salary ranges. It's a law in a lot of states, California mainly, and usually what California does, then other states just follow suit. So you should know the range of the salary of the level that you're at and where you are in an organization. And when you're interviewing, and we can talk about that separately, you should know the salary range of the job that you're interviewing for.
Thanks, Heather.
And I guess I would just add to that, it's important as you are, especially if you're early in your career. So obviously a lot of the folks that I talk to are students or very recent grads who are relatively early in your career. And I know that it feels like you want to be working towards something and seeing some advancement. It can take a little bit of time, and that's okay. There are things to learn while you're sort of making your way at your organization. And I would also just say, and this, I think sometimes I'm used to this working in higher ed, where sometimes we have fun things like hiring freezes and things like that. There are moments where it's just not the right time. And you got to wait a beat before, because you don't want to, all that data that you may have gathered or all of that case that you're trying to build for a negotiation, you don't want to use all that in a moment when it's not going to happen anyway, because there's a freeze or something like that. So.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you both. I know reading the room can be very important, and given today's environment, I think we're seeing a lot of uptick in that. So it's definitely important to be mindful of, the situation your current organization is in. So thank you both for the insight on that. Moving to the next question, what questions should you ask to HR or your supervisor versus your supervisor before navigating the salary conversation?
Yeah, I would go back to most, if not all, managers are really uncomfortable talking about salary or performance or ratings or any of those things, because that's not what they normally do. But that is their job. So you can ask that of your managers, and you always should. And you should try to work for good managers. That's going to be the best thing and worth more money than money is. So that's just my tip. I would say that you need to make sure, if you're asking about the salary range, your manager may not even know that. They should. They have access to it. It's in a system. But that is something, if you're not comfortable with, you could go to your HR business partner. And if you don't know who that is, you can ask that question too. And they could give you the salary range for your job. A lot of companies are very uncomfortable with this level of transparency. And with it has come the ability for you to, advocate for yourself more because you have a better idea. But also with it has come a lot of companies are proactively managing the salary ranges and where people fall in the salary range. And if you fall below, they will hopefully proactively put you in the level that you should be at. And also, we are doing gender pay analysis all the time. So making sure that women are paid the same as men in the same job. And that is something you want to make sure to look at and flag to when you're talking to HR or talking to you have to be super savvy with this. So I would say don't take that one to your supervisor.
The other thing I would maybe add to that is, and I've definitely had this happen before where somebody was starting to take on new responsibilities, but it was happening at a level that was definitely quite a bit higher than their original job description. So you can always ask, you should be able to access the kind of thing in your whether it's Workday or something like that, your job description. But if for some reason you have trouble finding it, I would just make sure to access your original job description at the salary that you were hired at, and see if it's getting really out of whack, because that can be another data point as well.
Yeah. And can I say broadly, I know we're talking about salary, but I think you really have to look in the market of broadly compensation, not just salary, and what it is that you as an individual values. And even in an entry level role, you can have some level of negotiation if flexibility is more important to you, if remote, which I wouldn't really lean on remote work right now, but if it is, that is important to you. If development in your career and what kind of development are they going to give you? Do they pay for an MBA? Do they have reimbursement for education? Do they give you unlimited time off? Like a lot of companies in California do. Like those are things to think about. And then the other cash part of your compensation is if you work for a public company, equity is usually a stake somewhere along the line, not at every level, but at least manager level. And a lot of organizations have an employee stock purchase plan, just called ESPP. And that also is a hard cash if you can contribute to that. So there's a lot of levers. And then depending on their benefit package, you may pay less out of pocket working for a company where you may make less, but you take home more if you start factoring some of these things in. So you really have got to go like big picture and think about first what's most important to you, and then line those things up when you're looking at compensation. And I would say to think broadly, not just salary.
And Heather, you would say that at the offset, right? Like when you're very first getting an offer and evaluating an offer from somebody, looking at that whole package.
For sure. And it could be a driver of how you look at the values of an organization and an organization you want to work for, because they're going to value certain things and put dollars and resources behind those. If that is a diversity and inclusion, and do they have employee resource groups, and do they observe certain holidays, and do they have flexibility or time off? Like those are all the things you want to look at. And I know, I'm not sure the age range here, but if we're talking early career, like we know that younger generations value more like corporate social responsibility and companies that give back and are inclusive. And if those are your values, you want to line those up with an organization you're working for. And I was joking, but not joking when I said working for somebody really good makes a difference, because you will enjoy your work so much more if you work for a values organization that aligns with your values and you work for somebody good. And in my 25 years, I haven't found many good, but when you find them, you really, really like just enjoy your job so much more.
Absolutely. Thank you both so much for that. And Heather, I know you mentioned talking about a little bit about seniority and things to consider. So maybe you can help us lead the way on how might your advice on salary negotiation differ depending on a person's level of seniority, versus when you're mid to early career, and what does that look like? What should people keep in mind?
Yeah, I think when you're more senior, you have more opportunities to come with the strategic way you're really impacting the organization. And if you can prove some of the, things that you were responsible for that directly impacted the bottom line of the organization, was a cost savings, helped the company reach the goals that they wanted to reach, like then you have more leverage to negotiate. And I would also think you're also more savvy on what's realistic, because you probably in a senior role are managing large teams, and what's the merit increase? What am I really going to get if I'm getting promoted? What can I ask for? And Anne mentioned it before. Sometimes you have employees that are taking on project work or a job because somebody's on family medical leave or on maternity leave or on a leave, and you're stepping in to help. And it's okay for you to ask, like, if there is some sort of compensation that may be aligned to having this extra body of work that you're going to do. And you may not get it, but then what you can do inside yourself is go, okay, I'm not making more, but what's the value I'm getting? Now I'm going to learn these 5 skills. And I'm going to take these 5 skills. And then when I am up for performance review and merit increase, I'm going to make sure that my boss knows I took on this body of work and I made their life so much easier. And that's worth something. And I know that the people that work for me, the highest paid, are my highest performers that work really hard for me and do great work. And so they always get more of the merit pool, and a higher bonus payout. And I have more flexibility with some of them too.
Yeah. And I think that is, I think supervisors want to keep the people who are putting in that effort. And so, I know that there's been times in managing even my own team that I try to look for ways to give those promotions in order to, to keep the people who are doing the work. And so, and I know I've been personally in situations where, I've had to take on an interim role or something like that. And maybe there was a tiny salary bump for a little bit of time and, not a lot, but it gave me time to kind of get my footing in that particular role and feel much more confident. So when the actual offer and the actual negotiation took place, I was so much more confident in that moment, having gone through that sort of interim phase. So it can be nice to have that.
Definitely. And I know like with the people that report into me, like I usually know what they value the most. So I know, am I going to lean heavy on giving them cash? Am I going to give them a higher equity stake? Am I going to offer them more time off? It's unlimited at my current company, so that doesn't really play, but you know what I mean? Like, am I going to let them work remote one day a week? Whatever it is that they want, like I know, and I manage to those types of priorities for those people. And then speaking of that, Anne, you triggered something at Nike, which is everybody knows Nike. We had what we called were stretch assignments, and you got these opportunities to, like I said, like cover for somebody's maternity leave. And sometimes you had to do both your jobs, but sometimes you could just go fully into that other job for 3 months. You didn't get paid more. It wasn't anything like that, but you got the opportunity to try out something new and learn new skill sets. And then you were usually considered like first in line if a job like that came up. And those were like great opportunities to just develop your skill sets and then be, more available or the first person thought of when a promotion happened, or even sideways. I think Anne mentioned it when we started, not all career paths are linear. There's a lot of sideways movement that really grows your skill set so you can make a bigger jump in the future, or you can really figure out what you want to do.
Thank you both so much for that. I know high visibility has been a huge value add in my career trajectory as well. And so I appreciate you adding some tethered to salary and how that whole ecosystem works. Given both of your wealth of knowledge and experience, is there something you wish you would have known more about salary negotiations earlier in your careers?
Yeah, I mean, I wish it would have been as transparent as it is now. I know, like when you look at what my career is, I don't do it as much anymore because I don't do one-on-one recruiting as much, but I used to negotiate all the time, and I would fight hard for my candidate and for my company to really land at something that I thought was really fair. But then when it came to like negotiating my own salary, I wasn't as aggressive, and I should have been, because like being able to negotiate and stand up for yourself is something that your employer is going to want you to do probably in almost any capacity in your job. Like, and I'm saying not in an adversarial way, but in a very factual, like strong stance. And so I just wish I would have spoken up for myself more. And, I'm in a position where I join a company and then I literally have access to everybody's salary and the salary ranges. And before, when that wasn't so open, I'd be like, oh my God, I can't believe that person's making more than me. They were smarter with their negotiation. But anyway, I think that is one thing I wish I would have done. And now I do it all the time. And you've got nothing to lose. Like when you are starting that conversation, when you're negotiating your salary, and you really want to think like, what would I say yes to right away? What would I need to think about? And what's a walk away? Because you also, no matter what the market is, you have a worth, and you can't just accept anything unless you are accepting something that is beneath what you really are valued at, because you're going to learn X, Y, Z, and that's going to propel you to the next thing. So, I don't think work is beneath anybody. So if Starbucks is the only option after college, I know some people that have done that. I waited tables at Red Robin after college. So it took me 6 months to land the job that I thought I should have had right away. So I'm just saying, working is better than not working.
I think I wish I had, maybe sort of similarly, I think I wish I had known that it wasn't going to make a potential employer annoyed with me or irritated with me, or retract an offer because I was going to try and negotiate. Anyone who's ever hired before knows that it takes a lot of time. The last thing we want to do is, if you're the candidate we want, is like start over. And honestly, and maybe it's because I work in career development and I want my advisors to advocate for students. So like, I want them to try and negotiate. It means that they're going to teach students how to do the same thing. So in my particular line of work, it speaks well of my candidates. But yeah, I think I was afraid of being annoying. Like, they're going to think I'm being so high maintenance because I'm negotiating.
Right. Or you're not interested in the job and you are interested in the job. Yeah,
absolutely. So it's okay to do that.
Yeah. Self-advocacy, it matters a lot, right? And it shows a level of confidence, I think, that some employers do end up respecting at the end of the day. And especially when you're in that position, right? You have nothing to lose. So
yeah,
that's really helpful.
I would say, sorry, I totally interrupted you. I would say make sure though that what you're asking for, there's some level of like, I'm asking for this because of this. Like, here's the value I'm going to deliver. I'll tell you a funny story that when I was a recruiter, an executive recruiter, I had a person I was making an offer to, and he asked me for more money so his wife could stay home. And I was like, what? That's not going to happen. I was so annoyed. I almost wanted to pull the offer, but I didn't have that authority to do it. But I did go back and say, this guy is not for us. We still hired him and he didn't work out. It just, to me, I couldn't even believe he was a VP hire we were making and he was asking for more money so his wife could stay home. And I was like, how does that bring value to my organization? So you just always have to think of it through that lens.
Mm-hmm. Right. And verbiage matters. I know we always make jokes about the LinkedIn verbiage that people use, but I think sometimes it matters. Like, I am enabled, I have the time. I think if he probably would have came to you and said, like, I need more money because it'll drive results or something like that was tangible.
Exactly. Then I'd be like, yeah, of course, because you're going to bring in 3 clients that we don't have access to. We'll pay you more. And again, it was the starting negotiation. So I was happy to negotiate. It just, that was not the negotiation point.
Yes. Well, so words and, tying things to direct impact do matter here. And you both mentioned a little bit about that, like, no work is, below anyone, and talking about that. And I know we're on this lovely university platform, but can we pivot the conversation a little bit to, did your college degree matter more or less than you expected in your early compensation? Have you seen trends, or has it impacted you directly? Do you have anything to share about that?
Yeah, I'll say this, like early days, I don't think it mattered, but I will say this. When I worked at Intel, which was a really long time ago, so long ago, it's not even on my profile anymore. We would recruit early career hires straight out of university, and there was a grid there. And I don't think these exist anymore, but I could be wrong. There was a grid there that was like, if you came from this college with this degree, you got this salary, right? And it was there was probably 3 tiers, but it was pretty specific. And that's where you could make the case. And also Intel, as soon as you got your MBA, your salary was increased. I think those days are gone. Like, I would say they probably exist in some places. PhDs in certain like technical skill sets off the charts, you're going to get your money. Especially like I'm in the Bay Area, and like optical engineers or any engineering person with PhD is high need. That said, your bachelor's, I think once you have your first job, that is what propels you with your career. But I will say your network from your college is really important to propel that, or the internship that the university helped you get. I'm going to go on a tangent here and say this. I do know when I was at Nike, I was part of the sports marketing group, was part of who I hired for. And we had all the sports marketing interns, and it was tied to the schools that we sponsored. So anybody that was wearing Nike gear on the field, like USC, UCLA, all of that. So if we sponsored your school, you had interns with us. they weren't necessarily from the teams, but they were from those schools. And what the schools wanted more than anything were the internships. They didn't want more cash. They didn't want more uniforms. They wanted more uniforms because what they wanted to do was to be able to sell to people going to their school. We get X amount of people that go to Nike to intern, and we have X amount of people getting hired from this place. So I think it really matters to universities to show the percentage of their kids that graduate and get jobs. And you can correct me on this if you're wrong. So the more, really diving into like university outreach and internship programs and those types of things, I think are the best things that colleges can do and how you really can propel your career pretty quickly.
And I guess I would sort of piggyback on that and just say that the degree alone is not the ticket into a job. I think it is very much what you do when you are in college, in addition to just like showing up for class. So, if during your time, I mean, it's totally expected, you walk into a job interview straight out of college. I mean, you're going to have to talk about the experiences. I mean, that's your work experience is what you've done when you've been in school. And if you don't have any part-time jobs or leadership experiences or extracurriculars or internships, even volunteer work, just something to draw upon that shows applied experience, that's going to be tough. So it's not just the piece of paper. It is the time, what you did with that time as an undergraduate that I think makes maybe the biggest difference. But so I think, and that's not to say you have to have, 10 internships by the time you graduate. It's just, you just need to have done something outside of the classroom so that you can speak to your professional abilities in some context.
Yeah. And I think too, with that, you can show a lot of leadership skills from any sports that you've played. You can, if you've gone on an overseas program, I know I did semester at sea when I was at Willamette, and that was very, I could speak to that in terms of worldview and things that I learned. And so you can really take a lot of experiences and make them strategic for an interview process, I think.
Absolutely. Speaking of strategy, I think that's a nugget that I always try to celebrate in my class when we talk about talent and talent acquisition. And I always give the insight that says, hey, looking at resumes in a strategic way and really talking through, sometimes it's like, well, how do I hire a manager that's never managed people? And I go, okay, maybe they didn't manage people in this capacity, but did they manage a board? Did they manage a student organization? They do have those skills. Like, how do you speak to that? So, and you both did give us some really excellent context about, the undergraduate experience. I would follow up with the following question of, at what point does a bachelor's degree really matter less as you progress in the level of seniority? And how might an advanced degree hinder you at the same times?
Yeah, I really think after you get your first job, your degree still matters because there's a lot of companies that are going to have a baseline. It's a degree or X amount of years of experience in lieu of the degree, right? That you'll see a lot. But I think after you get your first job, that is what starts to propel you to the next job and to the next job. More so than leaning on what was your GPA? Mine was so great, it's not on my resume. Just kidding. So, you know what I mean? And it wasn't back then. But it was, I will say it was enough. I felt great about graduating from Willamette. And here's another tangent. So I told you already about my stellar experience right after I thought I would go into broadcasting. That didn't work. It was a terrible time when I graduated, 92. It's up there. I know I'm old. But I got this job at Red Robin. And when they were interviewing me, they wanted to hire me as a hostess. And I, because I've never waited tables. And I remember looking at the guy and going, I literally just graduated from college, a really good university. I could be a server. And he just was so fun. He goes, okay, you're a server. And I was like, well, that was easy. But I literally was like, I can't believe you're going to hire me to be a hostess. I just got my college degree. So that was my pushback. That was my first experience with really pushing back and advocating for myself. So
solid negotiation right there.
Right.
I think too, there's, I think you should be. One thing that did happen to me in my career was that I was the first job. Well, I had gotten my PhD, and the first job that I wanted definitely did not require it, and I was really nervous that people would be like, why are you applying to this job? This isn't what you should be doing with this degree, but it's the job that I really, really wanted. And so you just have to be ready to talk about that. And so in my interview, I remember, and actually they asked me, they're like, why do you want this job? And I was really ready to answer the question. And it was not, my degree was not part of my negotiation. I knew that they could go with a different applicant who did not have a PhD. So I did not ask for more money simply because of a degree that I had, because I knew I was overqualified from an education perspective. So I think knowing sort of like, what is your objective? Like, why are you asking for what you're asking for, and having a really good reason for it is important. But just, I don't know. After, I agree though with Heather, like once you've had that first job, that bachelor's degree, and the major just really doesn't matter much.
Yeah. And I know we're talking salary, but I will say one of my other big tips here is, as you're on the job search or any time in your career, I think the number one way to get into an organization is to be an employee referral. So I think you really want to lean on that network, right? I saw you guys shake your heads. Like, a best practice for an organization is 30% to 35% of their hires come from employee referrals. And so that's always what I drive to. And it is like one of the easiest channels for me to really go aggressively on. And a lot of companies pay for employee referrals. So that is your best, I think, when it comes to getting a job or transitioning to a different company, and really for you to understand what that company is like, because you'd have a trusted advisor that's going to tell you the reality of what the company is like too, and like somebody on the inside. So I think every single job I've ever gotten, other than 2, were from an employee referral and somebody I knew at the organization.
Yeah.
Great.
I'll always sometimes tell students, like, if this is the org that you really want, or if it's the graduate program you really want, or whatever it is, the first time they see your name, I don't want it to be in the application. I want it to have been somewhere else first. So through an informational interview or a respectful email or just something, or you attended an event or whatever.
Wow. No, that stuff matters. It gets you, embraced in the company culture as well. And I know that referrals mean a lot. It's like you're that key person to say, hey, come on over. You're a good person that's been vetted, through an existing employee. We've answered a lot of questions on degrees and all of that. So I think we'll pivot a little bit here and say, what experiences would you say have influenced your salary negotiation tactics, especially going into mid-career, or even when you consider a career pivot?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna say the same thing that I said before. Like when you are getting a promotion and a new job, that is the pinnacle time, because once you are in an organization and you're not getting promoted, which again, you're not going to get promoted every year. It's like 2%, 4% means you have probably just like hit it out of the ballpark. But that is rare to happen. And especially if you're one of the highest paid on a team, you guys know the math here, 2% for one of the people making $10 an hour is a vastly different sum than $2, a 2%, somebody making $100,000 a year, right? So the 2% it's a very small merit pool that most people have to play with. So you've got to think of the other things other than, cash that's really important to you. And that's the time to ask for it. Again, like continuing education, there's a lot of events and like conferences that you can go to, stuff like that your company would provide you. And those are the things that I think are easier to ask for than just straight cash sometimes.
I wonder, there was a question that came up in the Q&A, Heather, and I am curious to have your answer on this. And so this is somebody kind of early career and getting landed with a lot of responsibilities that weren't in their initial job description and wanting to be able to like maybe negotiate a bit, but they're worried as early career and having the anxiety around, it's a tough job market out there. And so I like what you're saying about like asking for other things like professional development or, continuing education. One thing that they asked about was a title bump without a salary bump. And I'm curious about your thoughts on that, because I've definitely had bosses that will not do that because they were like, we will not, if I can't give you the salary that is appropriate to that title, I won't give you the title and have, you know what I mean? So
yeah. And a lot of organizations can't do it because like in bigger organizations, you have a very structured, there's a title, there's a job code, there's a salary range associated with that, because then it also usually ties to bonus, equity, all of those things. Or if there's not bonus and equity, at least it is a salary range and it's super structured. But if you work for a smaller company where some of that stuff is more fluid, less than 50 employees, some of those things, those titles are free. I will say loosely at a lot of organizations, we throw out, you're a senior director, but at your last company, you were a VP. So you don't want to have the senior director on your time. We can do like head up. Like we do that a lot, like head up. And so that is something that's pretty ambiguous and probably would help. And so those are the kind of things you could think of, but a straight, like calling yourself a manager, usually you can't, your company just won't do it because of what's tied to it, But again, smaller companies, like the company I work for right now is like 12,000 employees. And, like a lot of large companies are very structured in that way and they have to be. But we're literally hiring somebody right now that's going to be called head of because they didn't like the director level title we were giving them.
Wow. Thanks, Heather. And I've seen that a lot in my experience too, right? And that's huge in like the banking industry where you see these certain titles. And a lot of times when you're thinking about like market, what does this person who's doing something similar in the market, what does their title look like and the variance between the two? And so that's definitely a good leverage point to think about as well.
Can we say though, too, like that person that asked that question, if they're on this call, like, I know it's a tight labor market. It really is. It's a very interesting time right now. But you do not have to just get dumped 3 people's workload on you. You should not and do not. I think you have to be able to say for yourself, I'm excited about these opportunities and this is really exciting for my growth in my career. I really can focus on these 5 things and these 5 things are not getting worked on. Do you agree with me that that's the priority? You know what I mean? Like you're going to set expectations, but you're going to do it in a very professional way. And then you're going to also show like you only have so much bandwidth. And I would hope your manager would respect that. And also if they are counting on you by continuing to give you this work, this means you're one of their top performers and they're not going to want to lose you either. So, you can dance around that conversation, but I think you have the alternative is you get burned out and then you quit. And I don't think anybody wants that. Right. And so you have to, or you go, now I have nothing to lose, so I may as well ask for it. So don't get to that point either, because you want to have, and your manager is probably going to think that it's good that you've gone to them and you've really set your boundaries and you're prioritizing. This is the work that's most impactful. I think I should spend my time on this, and this can get paused for now. Do you agree? No, tell me something else.
Yeah, sometimes it's a good entry point into a discussion of sort of what are your portfolio of responsibilities. Because I've had staff do that with me, and my first thought sometimes is, oh yikes, I need to not lose them. I mean, that is usually my first thought, and then my second thought is, okay, if I can't give you a promotion right now, how can we reallocate what you're doing? And so I think that it's always okay if you're asking it in a respectful, open way, and inviting a dialogue around it. I think, it'll be respected.
That's helpful insight. There's a little bit of a follow-up to part of that question, and just giving some context, we're pivoting to the Q&A session because we have a lot of great questions. The scenario kind of following up is I'm in an early career position where I have far more responsibilities than what's in my job description. We've seen that with major staff overturning. I'm doing the job as I was hired for now with 15 months of experience, but I've also stepped in to support multiple other departments for the past 7 months. I am currently at the lowest end of the salary scale, but I'm doing so much more. That said, I do have amazing benefits. I just get upset knowing other employees are making more and doing less. How do you balance the number of months or years of experience seen on a resume versus the real experience of how much I have learned and accomplished in this time? And under the context of maybe title or salary, but just wanted to dig in a little bit deeper with that experience leverage on that question.
I think if you are working for a progressive company, they realize it is not about the years of experience, but about your performance and what you're delivering in the job. That said, probably a very small percentage of companies out there that are really going to be able to recognize that. I had this leader that I used to work with at Nike who I loved, and he was super funny. And he would say to me, Heather, that person doesn't have 20 years of experience. They have 1 year of experience and they've been doing it for 20 years. Because his point being, just because you say you have 20 years of experience doesn't really mean you have 20 years of experience, because you as an individual, he's talking about somebody on his team, has never grown. You're doing the same thing you were. That's not a value add. So I think you want to make sure, one, you do know that it sounds like this person knows the salary range and the midpoint. And a lot of companies like to stick right around the midpoint of the salary range for most people. I don't know why, it is just a thing. But I think it is worthwhile for you to have that conversation of all that you have learned and grown and developed. And then I'm sure you guys have all heard this, but comparison is the thief of joy. So do not compare yourself to, you do not know what that other, unless that person reports to you, you do not know what they're really accomplishing. Maybe they're leaving at noon for a long lunch, but maybe they're taking care of their sick mother and then they're logging on at midnight. Like, you just don't know. You think you do, but you don't. And so I would not ever compare yourself to somebody when you're talking about trying to get, and even in your mind, it's not good for you to do. That said, we all do it all the time, but I'm just advising you not to. So remember that comparison is the thief of joy. And I would say go to your manager with this, like these proof points of how long you've been in the job, what you've accomplished, how much you've grown, what you're looking to continue to accomplish, and what could the plan be to compensate you fairly for that work. And you don't have to come with the solution. Sometimes if you throw it to your boss, then they have to like think about it and come back, because you may undersell what they are willing to offer, right? And you may undersell like, well, can I get another vacation day? And they were like, I was going to give you a week and a raise. Now I just have to give you 1 day, So just, sometimes you can throw it up to your boss to make a recommendation.
Heather, I want to follow up on that because there's another great question in the Q&A about, so Scott asks, quantifying value is simplest when we can like say, I've saved X amount of dollars or, whatever. So what are with that last question, being able to sort of state your value to an organization, what are things that are more intangible or not tied to dollar amounts that you can point to demonstrate your value? So time saved, knowledge gained. What are some other examples that you can think of?
If you have seen, and you should see, no matter where you are in an organization, the strategic plan for the organization and what they're trying to drive to for business results, usually like there's a global business strategy, and then I sit in HR. And so then my HR leader, the CHRO, has a global HR strategy. And then I click in a global talent acquisition strategy into that. Like they all feed off of each other. So my people can say their impact to the organization as I pull that down. I mean, it's also easy in recruiting because you can say we have hired, 6,000 people this year, whatever that is. But those are the business drivers and the business levers that everybody should be speaking to. And also in your organization that you work for, you should see those things, because that should also help your leader prioritize work, because it should be driving one of your 3 to 5 strategic imperatives, or else maybe you shouldn't even be working on it. And even at any level, you should at least know how your work clicks into the greater good. And so then I think that's a way to do it without saying there's a true dollar ROI. You could also use the term cost avoidance sometimes, because you've done something that, or you use AI now. And so you are more productive and you get X amount of your work done faster, right? So you're able to take on something new, or, I think I would also that would be my tip, put some of these, not the questions, but put some of your work in AI and ask, because they'll go out and search and figure out what your corporate objectives are for your company too, and see how some of that ties in. But I think that's the lever. And then, if you're earlier in your career, your boss I'd be super impressed if somebody on my team came to me with all the ways they've added value to my organization.
Yeah.
In the work that I'm trying to get done.
And I think that's just sort of good standard practice for either these first time negotiations when you're being first offered something. You never want to go into those conversations without some kind of data and some kind of research. You want to make sure that you've done that homework so that you're never just throwing out, here's what I think I deserve. It's more about what does the market say, and you can use all kinds of resources for that. There's good websites on that. ChatGPT will give you a decent bit of info on that. But I think it's helpful just to never be guessing.
I'm going to pivot back just before we change topics. We have a couple of great questions out there, but can you please share some reliable resources, preferably online, for checking industry market value for your roles? I know we talked about AI, but are there any other tools or resources that either of you know of?
I mean, people used to use salary.com, but I never thought it was that good, actually. And honestly, the thing is to ask, you should have access to the salary ranges. I'm not sure if it's a state law, but I think it is. And even if it's not posted on a job description when you're applying, if you ask the recruiter, they're supposed to give it to you. So I also, with that, I wouldn't, if somebody asks you what you're looking for, I would kick that question back and either not answer it and say, I'm sure we can figure out an appropriate salary if we get to an offer stage, or I would ask what the salary range is too. But like I said, I think ChatGPT or one of the AI tools is your best bet, and knowing the salary range. Again, there's salary.com. Some companies have geographical pay differentials, and so that matters depending on where you're located. And so that can make a difference too. If you're looking to move to a really high cost of living, you got to take those things into account too.
Yeah. Thank you, Heather, for that. I think another best practice is I like to keep all that in a document. So if I thought at any given time, I kind of have my little receipt. And I'm sure my video is freezing, so I'll unfreeze myself. But being mindful of time, we have about 8 minutes left. So I'm going to pivot to 2 questions here before we kind of end up on our wrap up and see if we have time for any more Q&A. The first one was, I am curious about negotiations within the public sector. Salaries are often decided or scrutinized by the public. So do you have any guidance for how to navigate salaries when you are paid with public dollars?
Jeez, I don't know. Do a really good job so the public loves you. I don't know. That's got to be a hard one. But in those same lines, officers of public companies, their salary is out there too. We know what the CEO of Nike makes, and we know, right? So that's scrutinized too. But I think again, I think they have smaller margins to work with and less things to play with in the public sector. So that one might stump me, but I would say you think about your flexibility and some of that, but always come with the value that you add and why you are worth the money that you're worth. And then feel good about it, because just because you're in the public sector, you're doing like God's work. I swear to God, like it's hard. It's more difficult. And I have friends that work for nonprofits, and it's really, really, different budgets. You don't get equity and stock and all of those other things, but it's great work that's being done.
And there are a lot of benefits that you do get, like, especially like, let's say you're working for the state or something like that. There's going to be benefits that are above and beyond what maybe other organizations can offer in terms of, health or whatever it is, or pension. And but I do think that you should always be willing to have a conversation with your supervisor if it's time, regardless of the industry that you're in.
Yeah, those are hard conversations to navigate. And I know I do some work with our EDC with the public sector employees, and I do a lot in the public sector. So I'll just add a fun note. It's piggybacking off of Heather's notion, where you really do need to tie the impact of the work that you do to your performance. I think that's where a lot of that scrutiny gets debunked a bit, right? One more question here. Last one before we kind of wrap up. Q&A question says, I was switching career fields and took a job where I knew I would be underpaid because I wasn't sure about finding a job after switching fields. What would you suggest where you got a good promotion and are still being underpaid and have only exceptional reviews?
So I think you have to think this. Are you underpaid for the job? Because the company's paying for you the job that you do at that organization, regardless of the work that you did in a previous sector. It sounds like you totally pivoted your career. So you may feel that way, but that is the salary range and what that job is worth at that organization. If you know differently, because you know the salary range, then I think you should ask for it. If you changed careers because your other career paid you really well and sucked you dry, well, then you know the benefit you're getting right now by changing your career. So, and when we go back to earlier, we talked about how career paths aren't linear. Like maybe this is a little bit of a sidestep so that you could really accelerate your career and have the compensation that you want. So I think, again, you got to weigh what it's worth, but really think about what is that job worth at that organization. And if you're underpaid because you're not in the salary range, then that's the conversation. But if you feel bad because you made more at your last career track, then that's a decision you have to make for yourself.
Thank you, Heather. I'm going to try to do one more. Okay, Heather and Ann. And this is a pretty big one, so that's why I'm going to try to stretch us for it. I'm
trying to answer a few by typing too, so you know. Go for it, Justin.
When an employer asks, what salary do you expect? Should you show the exact amount or specify a range?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to assume you already know the salary range because you've asked that question. I think you can give it in a couple parts. Like, here is what I would take. Here's what it would take for me to say yes right now. Like I've done that before and been pleasantly surprised. But I think you have to know that number. But before you answer, you should know the range. And if you're early in the conversation, you're going to say, I'm sure when the time comes, like we can get to an acceptable arrangement. That said, you don't want to go all the way down the path of getting an offer and you guys not being anywhere close. So you got to make sure you have some touch points along the way without being super specific.
Thank you, Heather. Well, I know we have 3 minutes, so I know some of you have burning questions. This has been such a fun session to help moderate, so I'm so thankful for Heather and Ann for sharing these great tips with us all. We hope that all of the attendees found this discussion useful in navigating and continually evolving in the job market. We do look forward to seeing many of you next time again online for our next professional development session. I'm sure we're going to try to collect remaining questions and follow up here at the end, but I just wanted to extend my sincere appreciation for you, Anne and Heather, and for all your wonderful insight. And so with that, I will let anyone say any more parting words, but other than that, I want everyone to take care and have a wonderful evening.
Yeah, thank you. And if anybody wants to connect with me on LinkedIn, you can, and I will try to help as much as I can. Go Bearcats. That's what I'll say.
And you can always reach out to me in career initiatives. So if you didn't get your question answered, feel free to reach out to me through Willamette, and I'm happy to help out.
Great.
Thanks, Jasmine.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.